Hello everyone, and welcome to Earth Archives. When we think of oil, the first image that likely comes to mind is that vast golden desert and the oil rigs of the Middle East. But did you know? The country with the largest proven oil reserves in the world isn't in the Middle East. It's actually in South America, Venezuela. This nation was once wealthy and prosperous, but today it is mired in inflation, poverty, and turmoil. So what happened? How did a country with the richest oil resources on Earth become a symbol of modern economic tragedy? In today's video, we're diving deep into the fascinating and shocking story of this nation. If you're interested in geopolitics, economic development, or global energy issues, don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel to support us in sharing more of these lesser-known yet important global stories. When we talk about oil, the first image that comes to most people's minds is that scorching Middle Eastern desert. So hot it makes you sweat just thinking about it. Countries surrounding the Persian Gulf, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, seem to have an inseparable bond with oil. Oil has practically become their natural synonym. Just imagine, beneath those vast arid dust-filled deserts lies over 60% of the world's oil reserves, an astonishing fact. It's no wonder that these Middle Eastern nations have used their underground treasures to catapult themselves into global energy dominance, quickly building some of the wealthiest oil kingdoms on Earth. This image is deeply ingrained in all of us. From movies and news reports to geography textbooks, the Middle East and oil are always portrayed as inseparable. When you picture oil, you think of vast golden dunes hiding massive oil fields, of camels, endless deserts, and opulent Arabian palaces. With their oil wealth, Middle Eastern countries haven't just transformed their own landscapes. They've profoundly shaped global economic and political dynamics. Calling them the tycoons of the oil world is hardly an exaggeration. But did you know? The country with the largest oil reserves in the world isn't in the Middle East, nor is it located in the familiar continents of Europe, Asia, or Africa. It's in the distant land of South America, a country called Venezuela. This South American nation holds over 302 billion barrels of oil reserves, a number so large it's truly astonishing. That's nearly 40 billion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia, twice as much as Iraq, and more than 3 times the reserves of Kuwait. Just looking at these figures, Venezuela should easily reign supreme in the global oil industry and be a major focus of international attention. Strangely, though, when we talk about oil, Venezuela's name rarely comes up first. Why is that? It may have to do with its geographic location, international politics, or even media exposure. The Middle East often dominates the news due to war, energy crises, and geopolitical tensions, making it the go-to image when people think of oil. In contrast, despite Venezuela's staggering oil reserves, its long-standing political instability and economic problems have kept it out of the spotlight, leaving many people largely unaware of the immense oil wealth hidden within its borders. This South American country's oil reserves are mainly concentrated in the Maracaibo Basin and nearby regions, where the crude oil is of high quality and holds great commercial extraction value. As early as the early 20th century, Venezuela had already become one of the world's major oil exporters. It once used its oil wealth to build one of the most prosperous economies in South America. At that time, Venezuela's standard of living and national income ranked among the highest in the world. It was as if oil had made the country shine with dazzling brilliance. What's even more heartbreaking is that this country, which should have been wealthy thanks to its oil, has in the past decade become one of the worst performing economies in South America and even the entire Western Hemisphere. Despite its abundant oil resources, Venezuela failed to translate that wealth into well-being for its people. Instead, it fell into a devastating economic and social crisis. Hyperinflation skyrocketed to unimaginable levels, and shortages of basic goods became a daily struggle. Supermarkets were often filled with empty shelves, and essential items like medicine, food, and even toilet paper became rare and hard-to-find luxuries. In this vicious cycle, crime rates continue to rise, with frequent incidents of robbery and violence casting a dark shadow over once vibrant city streets. Many families have fallen into despair under the immense pressure of daily life. Unemployment remains high, and young people face unprecedented challenges. A significant number have chosen to leave their homeland in search of new opportunities and hope abroad. The economic crisis looms like a heavy cloud over this nation, a country that, with its abundant oil resources, was once expected to thrive. It's a deeply tragic and sobering reality. It is hard not to shake one's head in sorrow at the fact that this country, which should have been wealthy because of its oil, has become one of the worst performing economies in South America, and even the entire Western Hemisphere, over the past decade. With soaring inflation, shortages of basic goods, and social unrest, people's lives have fallen into hardship, creating a stark contrast with its vast oil wealth. Why is this the case? Why, despite possessing such abundant oil resources, has Venezuela failed to follow the prosperous path of wealthy Middle Eastern oil nations, and instead become synonymous with economic and social crisis? When it comes to Venezuela's geography, it's truly fascinating. This country, located in northern South America, covers an area of about 910,000 square kilometers. That might sound abstract, so let me put it in perspective. It's 25 times the size of Taiwan, 3 times the size of Italy, and even twice the size of Spain. That's a massive land area. In South America, Venezuela ranks 5th in size and boasts over 2,800 kilometers of coastline stretching between the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, offering breathtaking scenery. To the west, it borders Colombia, to the east, Guyana, and to the south, Brazil. It acts like a bridge connecting northern and central South America. Thanks to its unique geographic location, Venezuela is rich in natural resources. From vast plains and majestic mountains to dense Amazon rainforests, everything here showcases the abundant vitality of nature. With a population of about 29 million, the vast majority of people are concentrated in the northern part of the country, especially in the capital city, Caracas, and several other major urban areas. These cities serve not only as political and economic centers, but also as cultural and social hubs. In contrast, the southern region is entirely different, covered by dense Amazon rainforest. It is sparsely populated and resembles a wild sanctuary, preserving pristine ecosystems and rich biodiversity. These geographic conditions give Venezuela a huge advantage in natural resources, particularly its underground oil reserves, which rank among the largest in the world. However, despite this immense potential, the country has been unable to transform these resources into lasting national prosperity due to various internal and external factors. Venezuela's history is like a long novel, full of twists and turns. Imagine this land was controlled by Spanish colonizers starting in the 16th century. For nearly 300 years, almost all resources and power were controlled by distant Europe. It wasn't until 1821 that Venezuela broke free from Spanish rule and began its own path to independence, officially declaring itself an independent nation in 1830. In the context of global history at the time, achieving independence in the early 19th century was indeed a remarkable accomplishment. However, Venezuela did not immediately embark on a bright future after independence. For nearly a century, the country was plagued by political turmoil and instability. Governments changed frequently, military coups occurred repeatedly, and political factions fought endlessly, preventing the nation from finding stability. The lives of the people did not improve much either. The vast majority still depended on agriculture and lived in considerable poverty. In the 1910s, Venezuela reached a historic turning point. Large quantities of oil were discovered for the first time along the shores of Lake Maracaibo, a well-known region in the country. This news was like a giant stone thrown into a calm lake, sparking attention both nationwide and around the world. From that moment on, this long-time agriculture-based country began speeding down the path of an oil-driven economy and became the earliest South American nation to export oil globally. At that time, the world was in the midst of the first oil revolution. With the end of World War I, cars gradually became widespread, industrialization accelerated, and demand for oil skyrocketed. Gasoline became the core fuel powering engines, driving the operation of modern society. Due to its geographical location far from the wars in Europe and Asia, South America became a stable and important source of oil supply worldwide. Venezuela's oil perfectly filled this gap, and with its abundant resources and geographic advantages, quickly earned an international reputation. All of this not only completely transformed Venezuela's economic structure, but also laid the foundation for its place on the global energy map. From then on, Venezuela's oil became like an oasis in the desert, a symbol of hope and the country's future. However, this also meant that the nation's fate would become closely tied to oil prices, production, and international politics, ushering in a new era of challenges. By the 1930s, Venezuela had quietly embarked on an enviable path of prosperity. Thanks to its abundant oil resources, the South American country rapidly rose to become the nation with the highest per capita GDP in the continent. At that time, Venezuela was like a rising star, attracting countless eyes and admiration. By the 1950s, Venezuela had risen to the stage of wealthy nations worldwide, even ranking as the fourth richest country in the world at one point. Its per capita income surpassed that of rapidly growing economies like Ireland and West Germany at the time. Such achievements made it impossible not to admire the immense wealth and development potential brought by oil. On the political front, 1958 marked a crucial turning point. After a long period of dictatorship, Venezuela finally ended authoritarian rule and established a democratic government. This era of democracy became a catalyst for rapid economic growth. The national system gradually improved, society stabilized, and the investment environment became more favorable. The economy seemed to rocket upwards, with significant advancements in urban development, infrastructure, education, and healthcare. In the 1960s, the global oil market experienced a revolutionary change: the establishment of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. This organization acted like a sharp sword, giving oil-producing countries greater influence in the international market. Remarkably, Venezuela was not only one of the founding members, but also the only non-Middle Eastern country, standing shoulder to shoulder with major Middle Eastern powers like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, and Iraq. This undoubtedly secured huge economic benefits for Venezuela and secured its important position on the global oil map. The formation of OPEC allowed member countries to unify policies and coordinate production, thereby stabilizing international oil prices and preventing excessive price fluctuations. For Venezuela, this was a golden opportunity. Stable oil prices meant a stable source of income, enabling the national economy to continue prospering supported by its oil wealth. However, Venezuela's treasures go far beyond oil. Besides the black gold, this land is also rich in natural gas, iron, ore, gold, and coal. Its fertile soil and dense forests provide natural advantages for developing a diversified economy. In theory, with the right policies, these resources could serve as the foundation for economic diversification, reducing dependence on oil and bringing more stable and sustainable growth to the country. When talking about Venezuela's economic troubles, the term Dutch disease is key. It sounds like a strange illness, but it's actually an economic phenomenon named after the Netherlands' experience in the 1960s. After discovering natural gas, the Netherlands became overly dependent on its export, which caused a sharp decline in its manufacturing and agricultural sectors. Venezuela, this South American oil giant, has fallen into this very economic trap. Here's how it happened. As oil revenues poured in, both the government and the public naturally became dependent on this source of wealth, believing that simply selling oil was the way to make big money. As a result, vast resources flowed into the oil industry, while other sectors received little funding or attention. With increasing profits from oil exports, Venezuela's currency, the bolivar, grew stronger. What was the outcome? Imported goods became cheaper. Consumers preferred to buy these inexpensive foreign products, and local agricultural and industrial products struggled to compete. This situation is like concentrating all the roots of a tree in one direction, causing the other parts to wither. Agriculture and manufacturing were squeezed, losing vitality and competitiveness, and the country's economic structure became unbalanced. Over time, the entire national economy became like a seesaw out of balance. Just a slight touch could make it wobble dangerously. This dependence also brought another fatal problem: the volatility of oil prices. The oil market is naturally unpredictable, and when prices drop, the entire country's economy becomes like a house with its support beams pulled out, precarious and unstable. Over the past several decades, Venezuela has repeatedly suffered from plunging oil prices but failed to sustain its economy through other industries. This led to a sharp decline in government revenues and a significant rollback of public services and social welfare. The 1970s marked a seemingly glorious golden era for Venezuela, thanks to two key events. First, in 1976, the government fully nationalized the oil industry, gaining direct control over this vast wealth. Second, the oil crises of 1973 and 1979 caused global oil prices to soar, rapidly swelling Venezuela's treasury. At that time, the country's income surged dramatically and the economy skyrocketed, turning Venezuela overnight into a petroleum giant in South America. However, this wave of prosperity was like a sandcastle, impressive on the surface, but lacking a solid foundation. The volatility of oil prices is extremely high, causing the economy to fluctuate like a roller coaster. Thrilling yet nerve-wracking. When oil prices fall, the national budget immediately becomes tight. This dependence on a single resource planted the seeds for a deep crisis in the future. By the early 2000s, international oil prices soared again, giving the Venezuelan government more resources to expand social welfare programs and attempt to address long-standing issues of wealth inequality and social injustice. The election of President Chavez in 1998 marked an important turning point in this history. Chavez proposed the ideal of 21st-century socialism, advocating the use of oil wealth to fund free education, healthcare, and food subsidies, especially targeting the lower classes, offering hope to many who had been neglected in the past. During the years when oil prices were high, Venezuela truly seemed to be cloaked in a mantle of happiness. Various policies providing free education, healthcare, and food subsidies greatly improved people's quality of life, and the social atmosphere was full of prosperity and hope. At that time, some international organizations even rated Venezuela as one of the happiest countries in the world, and the people's expectations and confidence reached unprecedented levels. But behind this happiness lurked a fatal hidden risk. Almost all the funding for these wonderful policies depended solely on oil as the single pillar. In other words, oil was Venezuela's only cash cow, and the government failed to effectively develop other industries to support the economy. This kind of single dependency was like putting all the eggs in one basket, and once oil prices fluctuated, the entire economy immediately lost its balance. During Chavez's administration, although he emphasized social equity and resource redistribution, there was little progress in economic structural reform. The excessive reliance on oil revenues meant the government did not actively promote the development of diversified industries, such as agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. This left Venezuela's economy extremely fragile. Once oil prices dropped, the national finances quickly fell into crisis. Social welfare became unsustainable, and the economy spiraled into a vicious cycle. This situation also made Venezuela's political environment more complicated. A government dependent on oil revenues is prone to the resource curse, resulting in corruption and inefficiency in resource allocation. Public expectations and dissatisfaction intertwined, exacerbating social conflicts and causing frequent political instability. Simply put, when oil prices were high, the government could meet people's needs and maintain social stability. But when oil prices crashed, the entire country descended into chaos and hardship. By 2014, Venezuela's fate took a sudden turn, as if a heavy boulder had fallen hard on this oil-dependent nation. At that time, breakthroughs in U.S. shale oil technology caused a surge in global oil supply, leading to an oversupply in the market and a sharp crash in prices. From the golden era of oil prices soaring above $100 per barrel, prices plummeted below $40. For an oil-exporting country like Venezuela, this was nothing short of a catastrophe. As a nation heavily reliant on oil revenues, this price collapse was like having its economic lifeblood drained. Without stable oil income, the government still bore the burden of massive social welfare and public sector expenditures. To cover the fiscal gap, the Venezuelan government resorted to printing money wildly, which instantly triggered runaway inflation, plunging the country into a vicious cycle. By 2018, the economic disaster had reached its peak, with official data showing an astonishing inflation rate of 63,374%. What does this mean? Simply put, the hard-earned savings of the people essentially became worthless overnight, unable to even buy a bottle of water or a bag of rice. Prices soared day by day, and basic necessities like food, medicine, and even toilet paper became scarce. Stock shortages in street markets became the norm, plunging people's lives into unprecedented hardship. This economic collapse not only made life difficult for ordinary citizens, but also caused a massive breakdown of social order. Unemployment skyrocketed, crime rates surged dramatically, and millions were forced to flee their homes in search of new opportunities. The entire country seemed trapped in a deep quagmire, unable to escape. The sharp decline in Venezuela's oil production is particularly heartbreaking. In 2000, Venezuela's daily oil output was still 3.2 million barrels, firmly holding its status as a major oil producer in South America. By 2023, however, production had plummeted to only 780,000 barrels, an almost 75% drop. The story behind this is both tragic and complex. First, from the late 1980s to the 1990s, the Venezuelan government began nationalizing the oil industry. The original intention was to control its own treasures and maximize profits, but the actual implementation ran into major problems. The lack of foreign investment and advanced technology led to the gradual aging of oil facilities and insufficient equipment maintenance. Without funds and professional teams, production efficiency naturally took a significant hit. Additionally, frequent domestic political turmoil exacerbated the situation. Labor relations within the oil industry were tense, strikes became routine, and there was a serious loss of skilled workers, causing continuous setbacks in oil production capacity. The once glorious oil industry gradually fell into stagnation and even decline. Another important point to note, most of Venezuela's oil is heavy crude, which is viscous and high in sulfur content, making it much more difficult and costly to refine compared to the lighter, low-sulfur crude oil found in the Middle East. This means that even when oil prices are low, Middle Eastern countries can control production costs more easily, while Venezuela has to spend more on extraction and face high refining costs. This reality only worsens an already unstable economic situation. The extraction and refining of heavy crude oil require more complex technology and equipment, which poses a significant challenge for Venezuela, given its aging facilities and lack of funds. Coupled with the oil industry's lack of innovation and management reforms, the overall production capacity naturally cannot improve and instead continues to decline, negatively impacting the country's fiscal revenue. Regarding Venezuela's political situation, the changes during the Chavez era led the country down a more arduous path. President Chavez was known for his strong anti-American stance. He not only loudly criticized the United States on the international stage, but also actively promoted distancing from Western countries. This diplomatic approach severed Venezuela's ties with a traditional international financial system and foreign investments, resulting in a massive withdrawal of foreign capital and the gradual closure of international financing channels. For an oil-dependent country that relies heavily on external funding and technology, this was undoubtedly a severe blow. What's worse, domestic corruption worsened significantly. Frequent political struggles and unequal resource distribution further weakened an already fragile economic system. Rampant corruption led to the misappropriation of public funds. Money that should have been used to maintain infrastructure, invest in industries, and support social welfare instead ended up enriching a small elite, plunging the entire country into deeper crisis. Shortages of goods became a daily reality, with extreme scarcity of food, medicine, and basic necessities. People lined up for hours to buy essentials, sometimes even erupting into battles over a bag of flour or a bottle of milk. As a result, crime rates soared and public security deteriorated. Street gangs roamed freely, violent incidents became frequent, and many were forced to flee their homes. According to statistics, over the past decade, millions of Venezuelans have been displaced, becoming refugees in neighboring countries, creating one of the largest humanitarian crises in Latin America. Under these circumstances, Venezuela, once home to one of the world's largest oil reserves, has become a symbol in the international media of a petro-poor nation. It's like holding a winning hand of cards, but ruining the game due to poor decisions, political struggles, and mismanagement. Its story is both tragic and cautionary. Abundant resources do not guarantee national wealth, and good governance, coupled with economic diversification, is the true key to long-term prosperity. Looking back at Venezuela's tragedy, it is essentially a classic case of the resource curse. Despite having the largest oil reserves in the world, which should have symbolized immense wealth, Venezuela's overreliance on a single resource economy, lack of industrial diversification, political instability, and poor governance turned this treasure trove into a major economic and social disaster zone. In reality, if the government had opened its eyes during the peak of oil prices and wisely managed its oil wealth by establishing a sovereign wealth fund, like Norway did, and planned intelligently for the future, if it had attracted foreign investment and advanced technology to build a diversified economy instead of betting everything on the volatile oil market, Venezuela's fate would have been far less tragic. Unfortunately, when oil prices soared, the government chose to squander wealth on welfare while neglecting structural reforms, treating the country like a gambler betting everything on oil prices. When oil prices plummeted, the entire economic system collapsed almost instantly. Over the years, the economy has continued to deteriorate, social unrest has been relentless, and millions of people have been forced to flee their homes. This is a tragedy born from a combination of economic mistakes and political mismanagement. However, history cannot be rewound, and mistakes cannot be erased. Venezuela's future still holds hope. This country, rich in natural resources and full of potential, can gradually improve its people's lives if it dares to face reality, push for genuine reforms, restore the rule of law, attract foreign investment and technology, develop a diversified economy, and improve education and infrastructure. This South American oil giant has the capability to reclaim its former glory and become a regional economic power. Venezuela's story is a mirror that reminds us resources are wealth, but they alone do not guarantee success. How to wisely use those resources, build a stable and diversified economy, and ensure transparent and effective governance are the true keys that determine a nation's destiny. This is not only Venezuela's challenge, but also a valuable lesson for all resource-rich countries around the world. This is Venezuela's story, a journey from the golden dream of oil wealth to the nightmare of economic collapse. It possesses underground treasures envied by the world, yet it is deeply trapped in the quagmire of governance imbalance and institutional breakdown. Resources can be a blessing, but they can also be a curse. The key lies in how they are managed, distributed, and planned for the future. Do you think Venezuela still has hope to turn things around? What lessons do you think this story teaches us? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found today's content valuable, please give us a like, share it with friends interested in history and international affairs, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay tuned for more in-depth knowledge plus stories analysis.